Okay, well, we have 6 o'clock.
I was like, no, I'm just sitting here.
we just
And yeah, I was like, wait a minute, we're talking this way. Oh, here they are.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 6 o'clock. We're ready to go. Can y'all hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Great. Very good. Well, we'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is the roll call, please.
Jim Rogers,
Here.
Jeff Melinda, Mark Palmer,
Here.
George Reichert,
Here.
Renee Rains, Yvonne Jenkins,
Here.
Scott Hamilton,
Here.
Steve Workings,
Here.
Keenan Puller, Ken Sayer.
Here.
Okay, very good. Well, we're moving on to the approval of our meeting minutes from August 5, 2020. You all have had a chance to review those. If there are no corrections or changes suggested, I'll take a motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Unfinished business, we have none. So we're going on to new business, and this is a public hearing. And this is project number MA 20-00043. The property is located at the end of Courthouse Drive. Would the applicant please come forward, introduce yourself, and tell us why you're here tonight?
Good morning, or good evening, sorry, blurring together. My name is Jamie McLean with Greenway Engineering. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Drew Johnson, and Panhandle Dumpsters to request a rezoning for the parcel that is at the end of Courthouse Drive. It's approximately 2.6 acres. It's currently split zoned. They're wanting to move their center of operations, which is currently on Eagle School Road, behind Meadow Lane Plaza. They share the area with Nedley Water and they're renting it. They want to relocate their operations to this parcel within the city. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and I have lots of copies of the exhibits that are in your packet, and I've printed them off bigger because it always helps me.
Okay, so this is a rezoning from RP and BP to light industrial. And this is a public hearing. So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up for the public hearing portion of this meeting. So anybody that would like to speak for or against this rezoning, please do so now, especially if we have somebody online. Anybody coming forward? Anybody there? Oh, there's somebody. Please introduce yourself, tell us where you live, and your comments, please.
Barbara Brattina. I live at 116 North Tennessee Avenue, and I ask that you vote no on rezoning this lot from planned residential and planned business to industrial. This location is adjacent to Courthouse Apartments, a large residential area, which is the reason why that lot in question is predominantly zoned planned residential. According to residents I have spoken with, Courthouse Apartments is one of the best managed apartment facilities in the city. The manager takes pride in having no problem tenants, and the residents feel safe and secure. Allowing a dumpster industry adjacent to this residential housing will negatively affect the quality of life for these residents. The currently zoned planned residential development is far more conducive and compatible with the adjacent Courthouse Apartments and the nearby Washington Mews. As defined in the Martinsburg Zoning 541.2 special requirements, a planned residential neighborhood will have, quote, a range of dwelling types, local shopping facilities, parks, playgrounds, and reservation for educational facilities. These uses are far more appropriate to the neighboring residential areas than an industrial dumpster company. I respectfully ask that you vote no in rezoning this property from planned residential to industry. And thank you for allowing me my voice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else that would like to speak either for or against this planned rezoning, please do so now. Let the record show that there are no further comments, so I will close the floor for the public hearing portion of this meeting. Okay, so if the applicant, if you come back up, and then the commissioners, questions, comments.
If I may just make one clarification point, it is not actually it's a staging area. So what they do, and if you look at their current operation on Eagle School Road, they will maybe have 3 dumpsters parked in the back that are empty, that are cleaned out, and then they have the residential trash cans in the back. They're empty. They take them to dump them out. I went there quite purposely, unannounced, on a kind of rainy, dismal day to see how I would feel if I was living next to it. Quite literally in my, flats and sniffing at the dumpsters. There's no odor. There's currently townhomes that are behind it. They have no problem with, the applicant is proposing. So currently, if you go to the end of Courthouse Drive, if you look around, it's very well wooded and existing vegetation. So what the applicant is proposing, and is it okay if I step up here? This is just a larger version of what's in your packet, but they're proposing additional screening and a privacy fence to not infringe on the use of the apartments near there.
Do you have enough for her?
Absolutely, I brought 12. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. And Ms. Bettina, would you like a copy as well?
Okay, and just at this very moment, I'd like to let the record show that Commissioner Melinda has joined us as well.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a minute to realize it was 6 o'clock.
Okay, no problem. Welcome. And we finished with just to bring you up to speed, we finished with the approval of the minutes, and we finished with the public hearing portion of the meeting for the rezoning. So the applicant has addressed the commissioners, and we're taking questions and comments at this time.
Okay,
and
thanks.
Ken, just for additional clarification, this approval or denial, whichever the case is, of the rezoning request goes on to the city council. Is that correct?
That's correct. This would be a recommendation to council to rezone.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I would ask staff if there are any remaining concerns, if all the permit needs have been met, et cetera.
There are no permits at this time, as this is just a rezoning. We have not gotten to the site plan stage.
Okay. Would you anticipate any problems?
I wouldn't anticipate any, no.
What would this end up in the new zoning?
I believe it would be mixed-use commercial.
And this use would be consistent with that.
What are sorts of things might that open it up?
I'd have to look at the list for all the permitted uses.
In the comprehensive plan, it is called out as a mixed use area as well. orange.
I think what he was referring to is we're considering a new city ordinance. And, looking at how it fits that as well.
Yeah, but we can't make a decision. We can't, like, for instance, disapprove something based on the ordinance we haven't passed yet.
No, I agree with you, Jeff. I was trying to characterize it as all here.
Got it.
I also have some photos as well of the proposed site as well as the existing site, so you can see how they run their business currently. If that's at all helpful, I can pass those around. You have it in the packet? Okay. Oh, we do, yes.
Is there any trash in these dumpsters when they're located on this parcel?
No, so the client's business model is that they go and they take the trash to the landfill, then they bring the dumpsters back, clean them out, and then have them as a staging area. So it's where they park their trucks, it's where they park the yellow dumpsters, it's where they have then the yellow trash cans for residential. As you'll see in your packet with the photos of the site. So they line that up in the back of the area, and then to have the front is just essentially their, sorry, I don't want to step away too far from here. The front is essentially just their parking and then their office space. Just currently they're renting the space and it's a thriving business and they want to have their own property.
They haven't bought property yet.
I believe they have already purchased the property and the deed, I have a copy of it.
Do you know their hours of operation?
The hours of operation are, I believe like 8 to 5. It's not a late night business. It's going to be, driving by looking for like light pollution, that would be affecting any adjoining property owners.
I was thinking more along the lines of noise in the morning.
Yeah.
You don't think they would begin before 8 o'clock?
No, sir, I do not believe that. I don't believe the owner is here. He's celebrating his daughter's birthday.
So you said they clean the dumpsters on site?
Mm-hmm. In compliance with DEP regulations. But they had just brought some back the day when I went and took the photos. I showed up unannounced because I like to have an idea of what it looks like on an average day. And they were very kind once they realized who this lady was that was just showing up, and let me walk through the facility, let me walk back, and they said, oh yeah, we just cleaned out some dumpsters, there's some in the back. Like I said, it was a rainy, gross, humid day. I went purposely then, for seeing if there was, it was, now when I visited, it was probably in the late afternoon, not early morning.
Well, it seems to me that the applicant has given a lot of consideration to how this fits into surrounding uses. And the presentation is well put together and complete. So in the case of project MA 00043, I would like to recommend rezoning to the city council.
Okay, it's been moved to recommend. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Commissioner Melinda has been
This is Jeff
seconded.
Melinda.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Melinda. We've had a motion to approve and then a second. Any further discussion? Understanding that this will go on to City Council for their approval, final approval.
I
Any further discussion? Yeah,
When the screening that they put on the map, it seems like, I mean, it's not developed on the, when we're looking at it on the left side, but it seemed like that screening ought to be on the left as well as the right. If there,
We can certainly do that. We were showing that because if you go on the left-hand side that you're looking at that doesn't have the trees shown, it's just open space with nothing but trees there. There's a,
it's all just,
it's all open.
kind of wooded
Yeah,
down,
there's
but
wooded. But we can screen it just in case, because land lasts longer than people. You never know what goes back there. We can add the screening on that backside as well. This is just conceptual so that you guys can have a real clear idea of what we're thinking.
Mr. Chairman, this is Ken. I think this is a request for a zoning change and is not the site plan.
Yeah.
Correct, Kim?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is
Right.
correct.
So
we
when
can
it
address
comes to
that.
Yeah, we can address that at the site plan for the screening and
yeah,
all.
I'm sorry. You're right, I'm sorry.
So there's one more question. Would this fit, I know we're here now, but my question is, would this type of business fit in a next commercial zone?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one
Okay.
more question.
One more question.
Triangular parcel and not the land on either side of it, those would remain in the residential.
I believe they're planned business, at least the one to the west is.
They are.
Yeah.
Probably have to-
According to this map, it looks like it's B
Yes,
on the left and across the street.
yes, planned business.
So be allowed in that.
Any number of business uses. I'd have to look at the table.
Scott, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions then? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, I'd like to have a roll call then, please, on the votes. For those, please have a roll call.
Jeff Melinda,
Aye.
Mark Palmer,
No.
George Reichard,
Aye.
Rainey Rains, Yvonne Jenkins,
No.
Scott Hamilton,
No.
Steve Workins.
Yes.
Everybody.
And so that gives us, I'm sorry, what's the count?
3-3.
It's tied?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I get to vote then, huh? I vote yes. Aye.
So it'll be passed on to council as a recommendation from the planning commission.
Very good. Thank you, Ken. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going on to other business now, which is the proposed zoning ordinance presentation by Michael Baker.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Troy Truax with Michael Baker International. Tonight, we do a presentation that's shown on the screen, the proposed draft zoning ordinance for the city of Martinsburg. So just some background, purpose and need. As you know, your current ordinance, which was enacted in 1970, is outdated. Also, since that time, over those decades, you had numerous text and zoning map amendments that have never been comprehensively integrated into the document. You have a new comprehensive plan that was just adopted, passed in 2018. And then also since 1970, there's been changes to the West Virginia Code, which are your enabling legislation for land use planning, zoning, et cetera. And those are found now under Chapter 8A, land use planning, as it's titled in the code. So those types of considerations, outdated ordinance, new comprehensive plan, and revisions to the code are all being considered as part of this new rewrite of your zoning ordinance. Some more specifics of the West Virginia Code Authority. There's numerous articles within Chapter 8A. Article 7 deals specifically with the zoning ordinance itself. Article 8 deals with your board of zoning appeals. Article 9 deals with the appeals process. Article 10 deals with enforcement provisions. And Article 11 deals with special provisions. Actually, one in particular deals with group facility. So here's a case where you have actually the West Virginia Code governing specific land uses, and it tells you specifically that those are being permitted in any zoning district that allows certain types of residential products. So we've incorporated that into the zoning ordinance too. So that's where we really have to look at the code and make sure that we're following state law in some respects when it comes to, in this case, group facility, group homes. So those is some of the basics. So again, going back to the West Virginia Code, making sure that your new ordinance is in compliance with the requirements of state law in those respects. Also, too, in your packet, you're required, specifically by Chapter 8A 7-4, to conduct a study and report on zoning. So in that case, I worked with city staff, Dana and Kim, to prepare that required report. And specifically what it requires is, after adoption of a comprehensive plan and before enacting a zoning ordinance, a governing body, meaning your city council, with applicable planning commission input, must study the land within its jurisdiction. The planning commission must use the information from the study and the comprehensive plan and prepare a report on zoning. The report shall include the proposed zoning ordinance, the explanatory map showing the recommended boundaries of each district, and the rules, regulations, and restrictions for each district. And no zoning ordinance may be enacted without a study and report. So essentially it's meeting an administrative requirement of West Virginia Code. And basically what this report does is convey the draft zoning ordinance that you have in front of you. And really the report, what it really goes back to is your comprehensive plan, and uses a lot of information from the 2018 report. Also incorporates a lot of the analysis that we did through the zoning ordinance drafting process to bring it all together in this document. The rewrite process, we began this in earnest last summer, actually. The city went out for competitive selection for consulting assistance. Michael Baker was hired. We began then in earnest with the rewrite process in September of last year, 2019. We worked with an ad hoc steering committee that was appointed by City Council. You remember Mr. Melinda and also Barbara Bertina was on that committee. And we worked literally every month, had work sessions, as you can see in the photo there in this very room. From September to March, in fact, March 11th was our last committee meeting, and that's where we went into lockdown. But we had finished the lion's share of the work on the drafting of the ordinance and had all the inputs from committee members through that process. And of course, we, Michael Baker, provided the technical assistance to actually do the work and then really work in sync with staff since that time to accept comments, review. I know Barbara did a phenomenal job of going through with the fine-tooth comb, giving us a lot of comments that we have evaluated every single one of those and incorporated those that were applicable and appropriate based upon, and we had some pretty lively discussions, as Jeff will attest, and Barbara too, but really good, meaningful dialogue through that process. So again, I think what I like to say with the rewrite process is that I serve on my local planning commission up in Pennsylvania. I've been there for 19 years on that commission. So oftentimes these processes, even though it's a charge of your planning commission, you as a body for planning, zoning, et cetera, usually you'd like to have a steering committee that has representation from a variety of organizations. Your BZA was represented, citizens like Barbara were on the committee. Also, we had representatives from engineering consulting firms also to provide kind of a cross-section of inputs into the process. So I really like to say this process was not done in a vacuum, was not done by me and my team back at Michael Baker. We really worked hand in hand with the committee, with staff, to put the draft together. So in terms of the contents of the zoning ordinance, we started off, your current zoning ordinance, I think, has probably a good 15 or 17 different sections or articles. What our challenge is to make this a more streamlined zoning ordinance that obviously meets the requirements of the code, West Virginia Code, but also to make it more of a user-friendly document, but also a document that is more easily administered on staff's part. In this case, Dana is the designated zoning officer for the ordinance itself. So Article 1, general zoning provisions, covers a lot of topics in terms of your zoning board of zoning appeals, amendments, appeal process itself. So it deals with all the administration enforcement in one succinct section. Currently, you'll have those scattered throughout multiple articles. So instead of having those separated, we've done this in a fashion that's condensed, combined those all into one single article. Article 2 provides your definitions for your ordinance, which are all too important for the administration, interpretation, and enforcement of the ordinance itself. Article 3 deals specifically with zoning districts, so this establishes your new zoning districts for the city. Also references the zoning map, which is also part and parcel to the physical document itself, so that's also enacted as part of the actual adoption and enactment process. So the zoning map too itself is a legal document. Article 4 deals specifically with zoning uses, and the unique thing about zoning Article 4 is that we have a nice comprehensive table up front, as you'll see in the draft document, that lists out all of the uses which are defined. So actually every use is now defined in your ordinance. And also too, that table cross-references where the uses are either permitted by right or by special exception in the various zoning districts that are actually on the map. So we cross-reference with a quick, easy reference to find out which uses are permitted in which districts, etc. Article 5 deals with supplemental regulations. These are regulations that deal with a variety of other non-use types of matters, but are pertinent to the zoning itself. Actually, in the table of contents gives you a quick reference of what those cover. For example, it could be accessory uses in structures like yard requirements, density standards, encroachments, fences and walls, murals, non-conforming uses, etc. Swimming pools is also on there too. Then finally, the last article deals with signs. So obviously all zoning ordinances also cover signs as in either a permitted or non-permitted sign type of use on certain types of properties depending, and there's also a table in that section too that tells you what types of signs they're defined to. That section itself also includes a comprehensive list of definitions for sign specific there. So that's a kind of a 30,000-foot overview of the document that I'm sure you've looked at. I know this is an eye chart and I apologize, but what I'm trying to get at with this slide is on the left-hand side, we've categorized all your existing zoning districts and the proposed zoning districts. So right now you have districts that are residential, you have districts that are mixed use in nature, you have districts that are industrial in nature, you have institutional districts, not currently, but we've created a new institutional district in the new ordinance. And there's special districts, and these cover your current districts of historic overlay and floodplain overlay. So your current zoning ordinance right now has 21 different zoning districts. So you think about 21, your city itself is divided or governed or regulated from a zoning standpoint of 21 different zoning districts. That's pretty significant number. And what it shows you over time that you've done rezonings, et cetera, that have actually created these new districts. And if you look at your current zoning map, one thing that the committee looked at right away was they really kind of have a patchwork of different zoning districts scattered throughout the city. Sometimes maybe like tonight, you have certain areas that will rezone for certain purposes and for reasons, of course, specified. But what we've done is taken a whole fresh look at your city boundary and the uses there within, looked at your comprehensive plan, worked with the committee, and we did what we called a transect analysis. And we looked at, from a density standpoint and a form and function standpoint, taking your downtown core and then going out from there and doing what we call a transect analysis. It's in the study and report on zoning, to determine how are each parts of the city, what's the form, the building form, and what's the land use function that's occurring there. And we've used that as a basis to come up to say with a logical approach, and also not just current uses, but what you envision going forward over the next 10, 20 years of future growth and development in the city. So what we've come up with is this schematic where we cross-reference the existing zoning districts, the district types with the new districts, and that's what you see in the middle. So we have urban residential, suburban residential, downtown, mixed-use residential, mixed-use commercial, and then because of the future land use and growth, most of your industrial sites were the former brownfield sites in the city. So we collectively decided that, future industrial properties, usually now they're moving out, like Procter & Gamble has moved out to the county. Your transportation, logistics, warehouse distribution, those are moving to large business parks. So we think about transportation was a hub or a heart of those industrial sites. Now those transportation networks are pushing, larger sites are needed to accommodate more industrial growth, et cetera. But we do have within the mixed-use commercial what we call craftsman industrial. So we do allow certain very light craftsman style. It's specified in the ordinance, but in terms of large industrial properties, that's not envisioned in terms of your future land use of your comprehensive plan. And also, too, is one you see it's not provided for as an actual district within the new zoning ordinance. We did, however, though, recognize that the growth of the West Virginia University Hospital area is growing because now you start to see more clinical space growing as an outgrowth from that. We felt that that has such a large and potentially growing footprint in your city that we decided that that's a good opportunity to think about from a medical institutional type of zoning district. So now we've introduced what we now, of course, say is medical institutional area in the city for zoning. And then special districts, we've retained your historic overlay district. Of course, we had to. Floodplain overlay, of course, we need to. But also, too, we've thought about two additional new types of special districts. One is called, and I'll get into this, annexation reserve, and the other one is the economic development overlay, and I'll explain those a little bit. So Article 4, just a little bit of kind of a precursor. The table that I mentioned that kind of gives you this cross-reference of uses. This is just a snapshot of the very first segment of that table, but you can see on the left-hand side, it gives, in this case, we're starting off with what we call principal uses. Principal uses then are broken down into residential and lodging, civic and institutional, open space, retail uses, service uses, adult uses, employment uses, and infrastructure uses. So those are what we call the principal uses. That's the primary use of any property. Then we also have accessory uses. So these are accessory to the principal uses. And then we have several temporary uses provided for. Every use that then, if you look at the table, on the left-hand side or column of that table, you'll start to see the principal uses beginning with residential and lodging, and then each of those sections then have a specific defined use. So for example, single-family detached dwelling, all the way down to efficiency micro-unit dwellings are just the start of the list of that residential and lodging. And then the table continues on the subsequent pages that then talks about civic and institutional, open space, et cetera. And then further on that table, you'll see the zoning districts at the top, and then you'll see either an R that represents a use permitted by right, or an SE, it's a use permitted by special exception. So it's a very quick reference table. Those cells that are blank, those uses are not permitted in those particular districts where you have blank cells. So you can see a very quick reference, so you don't have to scatter throughout the document and figure out which uses are permitted in which district, okay? So just a little bit of kind of an overview of each of the zoning districts. So urban residential, And these pictures that we have here are trying to give you a representation flavor of these areas. So in this case, urban residential may have in this picture showing a kind of a one-story building that was probably a former residential structure, but there's a commercial use. In this case, it's a real estate office right next to a residential use. But again, this is more of a neighborhood type of use, commercial use mixed in with a residential neighborhood. If you look through the urban residential area, that's the flavor and character that you get from that district, because it really was kind of the second tier of growth outside of your downtown area over time. So this district, each district also has a purpose and intent statement. These slides paraphrase those purpose and intent statements that are part of your zoning ordinance that define each district. So the urban residential district is characterized by older residential neighborhoods, areas of the city, where a variety of housing types and supporting neighborhood commercial businesses, like I showed you in the picture, exist, forming a compact and urban grid development style. Again, these are not curvilinear streets. These are grid streets, if you will, that are an extension of your downtown area. And of course, that provides that well connections to downtown and promotes reinvestment and revitalization opportunities within this older areas of your city. So one thing that we really talked about with the committee was, where are other places where we might have corner stores or neighborhood style businesses that are kind of walk-up shops, don't require a lot of parking, never were meant to be some big commercial outlet, and that's not what we're trying to promote in urban residential. So the committee, we actually did some research and found some really good examples. So North Locust Food Market in Hagerstown is an example. Another example in Hagerstown is Gordon Grocery. One of your council members, Ken, was on the committee. He actually, his brother lives nearby this. So I went and visited. I took that picture, and literally it sits right in between, right in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So again, these types of neighborhood style businesses do and can exist very well and complement a residential area. This is one in Harrisburg, PA. Our office is up in Harrisburg where I work. This is a place that I visit frequently for lunch. It's a family-run Italian restaurant that has a pastry and bakery shop in it. And it sits in a sea of various types of housing in the Midtown section of Harrisburg, PA. So again, showing you the kind of ideal, what we're getting at with the urban residential neighborhood type of zoning and what uses we're permitting there. So we also did a local case study here in your city. This is the old engine company station at the corner of Virginia Avenue and Silver Lane. Right away, what comes to mind is that picture I just showed you with that sort of outdoor neighborhood cafe. So a potential opportunity to think about for this type of use is this building, which is now residential. If somebody wanted to say, I've got a business idea, but I want to make it small scale neighborhood style, then this is potentially what you could start to think about with a walk-up neighborhood cafe with some outdoor dining, and also how it then could complement the existing street network to encourage walk-up and also safety in terms of any increased activity that might occur at this type of business. So this is one idea we explored. Many really thought, boy, that's a kind of a great type of thing we want to start promoting, is these small family-owned businesses that could be integrated and work well within an existing residential neighborhood. Again, the urban residential neighborhood really kind of has that mix of uses integrated with residential uses. Suburban residential, this is Tennessee Avenue. In fact, Barbara, your house is next door, right? I tried to get your picture on here, Barbara. The tree in front was blocking. It wasn't giving me the good vibe I wanted. So in this case, suburban residential, predominantly developed as single-family housing neighborhoods with large front yards to provide privacy. So again, you look at that picture before, it has more of that suburban type of growth development. So again, you have some grid streets here, but you also have parts of this neighborhood linear streets, more of that suburban growth. Maintenance and protection of the existing established residential neighborhood is a major goal of the SR districts, and really limited the types of uses that are all permitted in this district. What we're really trying to do is really focus on just permitted residential uses here. Future development will generally occur in a gradual manner through the infilling of vacant lots or replacement of older structures. So where we might have vacant lots, and there might be maybe, for whatever reason, a building that had to be demolished because of a fire or whatever issue, any future development, when the ordinance is set up, we want to make sure that whatever new structure is placed there is in conformance with, in terms of the size, the setback, look and feel of that existing structure.
Excuse me for a second. What if we instruct people on to mute their microphone, or suggest that? Someone needs to mute the microphone. And maybe we just figure out.
Wash the dishes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, again, the new infill should reflect the character, scale, and site placement of the neighboring homes. So we're really trying to think about, we really want to protect and preserve, in this case, I'll go back, this type of look and feel in this part of your community. Very tree-lined streets, walkable, quiet, etc., low traffic, if you will, only those residents that are living.
I can't. There's it's somebody else.
So your downtown district, I'll try to talk a little louder. Maybe I can pull my, you mind if I pull my mask down? It might make it, okay, there we go. So the downtown district, again, by this photo, you can walk outside and get that same flavor, but you can see it's a different type of character, different form, higher density. You have commercial property, storefronts with large window plate glasses so you can see the displays or activity on the first floors, restaurants, businesses. I know Barbara, your family has the jewelry store downtown, but then on the second and third floors, then you have opportunities for residential, apartments, what have you. But again, you can see the buildings are much greater massing, close together, right up against the sidewalk, and promote that walkable feel, if you will. In terms of parking, on-street parking or behind it in lots, etc. So it has a much different, distinct feel. Beyond the downtown area, I call it what we call our Elm Street area. You have, again, highly dense areas that have largely residential streets, blocks, but then you also have some businesses mixed into those properties as well too. But again, downtown district, but there's two different types of zones within the downtown district, as you'll see in the zoning ordinance. So the goal here is to establish to maintain the character and function of the city's historic central business district and its bordering historic residential neighborhoods. I call it Elm Street, Main Street, and Elm Street. Promotes that Main Street environment characterized by mixed use, walkability, accessibility, and connectivity. Public transportation access. Obviously, that picture showed you that the train station from a wayfinding is right down the street. And public spaces and the sharing of parking and other public infrastructure. So we don't have these driveways for individual uses. It's shared parking, shared uses from that. So you get the idea. The next district is what we call mixed use residential. This really kind of captures where some of your new growth is occurring. Martinsburg Station is a good example here of where this zoning would apply. And it really kind of envisions these new communities that also too, predominantly residential, but also encourage an integration of supporting commercial uses. Again, more neighborhood type scale uses, maybe a dry cleaner, maybe a child daycare, things that those residents of that neighborhood could actually have a quick stop to get whatever they need, or have that, or maybe a medical clinic. Again, neighborhood scale types of uses, but the predominant use is residential. That's why it's mixed use residential. So it promotes higher density and a diversity of residential uses that are integrated with personal and professional services, as well as retail, all again market driven and what would be supported there. Commercial uses may be integrated into a residential building in terms of vertical mixed use to provide opportunities for new development and redevelopment of existing well-connected neighborhoods. Again, intended to accommodate new growth in areas near activity centers and major streets and to allow for a vertical or horizontal. You could actually have maybe an independent separated building like a daycare center or another commercial use that is actually a separate building, but part of that whole planned community. And all new development and redevelopment will be pedestrian oriented and shall be accessible via local streets to parks, schools, and nearby commercial centers. So again, we're thinking these are well planned out communities, not just individual projects that are cropping up in these districts. That's the spirit of what we're trying to get at here. Mixed-use commercial, kind of like mixed-use residential, where residential is the predominant use. Mixed-use commercial are the predominant uses, but allows other types of uses, including residential, to be part of that development. So I use this picture because this is along Foxcroft Avenue. Everybody knows where this is. This is where your mall used to be, but you're starting to see a transformation of that into these new commercial spaces. But I like to think about, your large sea of parking is really untapped potential for additional infill development that could be higher density types of apartment living or townhouses that then have walkability now within that type of commercial environment to those commercial spaces. You see also too, your new hotel has actually been constructed where the mall used to be. So that's integrated into this type of environment too. So again, you want that walkability, accessibility, not that this is trying to eliminate this or at least tamper down that this is a car-oriented predominant environment, which it really has been since it's been developed. We're really trying to think about what the growth trends are going forward. And what we're seeing is you're having a lot of folks wanting to maybe move out of the larger cities like DC, find places like Martinsburg to live, but also they want affordable places, but maybe not want to live in the suburban commercial where you've got large lots. They want something that's more small, less maintenance, more efficiency style or townhouse style, et cetera, types of living. So again, provides for the development of commercial and related businesses, activities designed to serve the community, promotes upper floor residential uses and other multifamily buildings within a planned development, promotes reinvestment and redevelopment of the city's gateway areas adjacent or connected to major transportation corridors, including Interstate 81, routes 9, 11, and 45. So a good case study here, Dana, you might have seen this, but Dana brought this to my attention. It's down in Ashburn, Virginia, 1 Loudon, where you've got more of this town center type of environment where you've got mixed uses. It may not be on this grand of scale, but it kind of gives you that flavor that you can actually, you have good property that has good potential because it's access to transportation, but also you've got the convenience shopping, grocery, restaurants, other services. There's even a healthcare center right down the street, like an urgent care. Lowe's is there. So again, you think about that's kind of an opportunity to attract other uses, including residential, to increase density and maximize the value of those properties. This is also there too. This is part of the townhouse portion of 1 Loudon. So again, you can think about that's kind of the intent we're trying to get at, is to have these types of residential products mixed in with these types of commercial uses. Medical institutional, I think this is pretty obvious in terms of, if you think about the growth of, out from the WVU Medical Center. So this is a good example of clinical space that's growing as an outgrowth to the hospital's growth. So established to support existing medical campus and institutional land uses within the city. A lot of this is then again concentrated in this part of the city where WVU is. So again, we felt because the footprint was growing and continuing to potentially grow, that we really need to think about what type of zoning would be appropriate for that area, and to sort of start to think about the concentration of those uses there. So annexation reserve, these are these special districts. So if you think about it, you do have the ability to annex either by petition, or the city can go out to election and have that. Oftentimes you have petitions coming in. So in the cases of those petitions, you may not have thought about where that next request would be to have property that are in the county want to be annexed into the city. So we've prepared this brief district, but this district is meant to be a temporary holding district that we would apply that annexation reserve zoning to that property, because when it's annexed in, it has to be zoned something, right? You got to zone, you can't have any place unzoned. So that annexation reserve is a holding until the city planning commission, staff, and council with public input collectively decide what's the best zoning. What should this be amongst the categories that we have, or this something brand new that we never thought of? So that's exactly what this is for. It's meant to be temporary, et cetera. It doesn't have any specific uses in it, but again, it helps to bridge the gap between annexation and where you want the actual zoning to be classified on a permanent basis. Overlay district, you currently have an historic preservation overlay district. We're just reinforcing that by still including that in because we have to. You have several historic districts in the city that's governed by an actual historic ordinance, protection ordinance. So this district just simply provides where does zoning, that historic district overlay, apply in terms of the districts, and it really applies to those boundaries of your historic district, but it's a function of zoning, is why we need to include it in the zoning ordinance. Same thing with floodplains. We need to designate through the zoning map where the floodplain overlay applies. The regulations for floodplain development are regulated through the city's separate ordinance, 2009-06 to be precise. So again, we're referencing that ordinance or incorporating that separate ordinance by reference into your zoning ordinance, but really the tool is your zoning map of where the overlay boundary applies. Because you have, in the historic overlay and floodplain overlay, you have what we call the fixed districts, suburban residential, urban residential, and then on top of that, the overlays applies additional regulations that are also accompany the base district regulations in the zoning ordinance. And then a new one, because of all your brownfield opportunities, you've done extensive brownfield studies in the city, working with Shane Farthing as part of this, and the city council was actually taking a step to begin moving this process forward last month at one of their council meetings. So what this does is it facilitates the redevelopment and reinvestment within future approved urban renewal districts in the city. Those have to be designated by city council through the implementation. It is implemented through the Urban Renewal Authority law under the West Virginia Code. And again, authorizes city council to establish an urban renewal authority as a separate body, and also those urban renewal districts. Most likely those districts would apply to where your brownfield sites are. For example, in this case, this is one of those sites in the city. The zoning map has been drafted. I think a really good portion of this, it's not just a hard copy map, it's actually an online searchable web map. So right now I know city GIS staff are doing some updates to it because we created it, Michael Baker. We transferred all the data to the city and their GIS department is integrating that into their system now. But we did have last month an open house. Yvonne, you were attended, and we were able to actually ask attendees, what's your address? We would punch in their address into that website and it would take you right to that spot on the map, and it would give you information. What's my zoning? And that's what the city department, GIS department staff is now doing, is integrating more information into that searchable interactive map. So that's another tool that makes the zoning ordinance more useful now going forward, and it will be more robust as time goes on. So just to wrap up, I appreciate your patience. Our next steps, we already had the open house back on October 15th. We had that from 9 o'clock in the morning through 8 o'clock that evening on the 15th. We met every hour. I think we took an hour lunch break and a dinner break, but we had decent attendance at that. November 4th today is to present the draft document to you. One thing I know you're considering is whether or not this body wants to have a public hearing. And I know that's been put forth by staff as a consideration. So again, that will be determined based upon your decision to proceed with that. And then thereafter, once you get through your process and you pass the document on to city council, I think the goal is through the vetting of the planning commission, either through this meeting or also through potentially a public hearing. We want to make sure we're in the best position to present this to council so that everybody's had an opportunity to contribute input to it. And then so by requirement, city council must hold public hearings. 2 are required. One must be held in the daytime, one must be held in the evening. Those would constitute your first and second readings as required of the ordinance. And then you would have council would have a special meeting to enact the ordinance at a date to be determined for the third and final reading of that ordinance. So that kind of gives you a preview. I honestly, those dates are to be determined, and because I don't know. We're most likely looking sometime, hopefully in the first quarter of 2021. But of course, your schedule will determine council's schedule going forward. And just the final slide, obviously, you know, the planning department's website is where you can find all this information. Questions or comments are to be emailed to zoning@cityofmartinsburg.org. And Dana and Kim have been receiving some questions, comments, and have been going through those at length already. And we've been making, you know, kind of where we think is appropriate, making changes, modifications. So again, It's not a done process. Again, we're got through the heavy lifting with the committee, the task force, if you will. Now it's bringing it to this body. So basically the committee's done. They've taken it to a point where we're ready to present it to Planning Commission. That's what we're doing here tonight. So really now it's in your hands to review it, et cetera, and determine how you want to proceed forward. So I'll take any questions that you may have.
Yeah, at least 2 former planners sitting on here, Mark and myself.
Very good.
And I was a county planner for 6 years.
Okay, Steve.
I spent a lot of time writing zoning ordinances. And I think that this is well organized, easy to read. And your charts idea is a really good idea. I also think that the process we've gone through to get to this point pretty much guarantees it's in good shape. And it shows. I do wonder how we can make any additions or changes. So can I suggest one today, or do I need to do it through the email?
I think that's the word.
Something I'd like to see in there that I'd like to bring up. Can I do that today?
Yes.
I've lived in Palm Coast, Florida, and spent a lot of time in adjacent towns of Daytona Beach and Norman Beach, a lot of places sometimes. Palm Coast and many other cities within their noise ordinance also have, they specify how much noise your car stereo getting in. And generally, there's lots of other places to do it. Generally, you'll find that the rule is if you can hear the stereo, you can hear your audio at a certain decibel range, 75 feet from the car, you violate the noise ordinance. And having lived in a town that has one of these pump codes, it makes a world of difference. I know that even just walking here today, someone going down Main Street, you know, I knew that there was some loud stereo. I'm the first one to love loud rock and roll. But, and my neighbors know too. But I hear it on Winchester Avenue. I live about a block from Winchester Avenue, all summer long. And I'm not suggesting the police make a campaign out of it. I think that it merits consideration that we do something about car stereo noise as part of the noise ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, this is Ken. Of course, we do have an ordinance separate from the zoning ordinance that deals with noise violations.
Ken, do you happen to know if it deals with car audios?
Pardon me?
You happen to know if it deals with the car stereo noise that I was discussing?
It does not have a decibel level. I don't have the city code in front of me, but it is relatively comprehensive. And if I'm not mistaken, I actually think it has a jailable component to it. So I can get you a copy of that and you can take a look at it. But like I said, I don't have it in front of me right now to say exactly what were the criteria in the noise ordinance.
Most of the escalating fine for second and third offenses sort of thing. But yeah, if it's already there, then never mind. But normally it's in an ordinance.
Yeah, and on that point, some things what we've done too, we've recognized that city code actually governs certain uses or certain provisions, and you might see in a couple of spots where we say you have to refer to the city code because we don't want to replicate or be in conflict with something that's already on the books for the city code that might be dealt separately. So there is the potential, there's a section called nuisances under supplemental regulations. So there might be, we can talk to staff to see if that might be the place to do it. But that might be an opportunity. I'm not saying that that's the answer, commission member, but that's potentially where we could incorporate by reference to say, see city code for certain noise standards. So we'll look into that. I think your solicitor, Mr. Sayer, could help provide some insight to that too.
Okay, thank you. Actually, quite a job well done, I have to say. Just super, super impressed. So congratulations, and Commissioner Melinda, thank you so much for taking the lead on this and participating and being the Planning Commission's representation on the ad hoc committee. Certainly appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Troy and his folks did an awesome job. City staff was great. And whoever thought of putting me and Barbara Brattina on the committee at the same time, we had some robust discussions, but I think it came out with a better product as a result. So I appreciate her input and those robust discussions. They were fun. They were productive. I think we got a better product for the city as a result.
Well done. Well done.
And she did a ton of just line by line looking at that thing, and I think a great deal of that's been incorporated in it. So that again, that made this a better product, and I really I think this is a huge step in the right direction for the city as far as its zoning.
Thank you. And kudos to you, kudos to Michael Baker. Just really, really awesome job. So very good. Okay, so any other questions or comments from the commissioners then?
So would this leave the door open if somebody did submit something previously to have it and it was like declined, denied, they could go back and resubmit with these changes?
It would have to be, once this is enacted, then it would have to follow by, so any existing uses that are currently permitted under the current zoning ordinance are grandfathered in. So if there's, let's just use an example, there's an industrial property that is now zoned something else. If it's not provided for, it's considered a legal non-conforming use. I mean, it's legal because it was permitted legally under the current ordinance. It's just now not permitted under the new ordinance, but so it's legal, it's just non-conforming because it does not conform to the current ordinance standards. So again, if somebody wanted to bring something back in, and it would be under, when this would be adopted, it would have to follow this, and it would not, because the adoption of this would rescind and replace in its entirety your current ordinance. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Remember?
So these brown areas can never be industrial again.
Correct, because they could have what's called craftsman industrial, maybe some like, let's say a brewery or a distillery wanted to open up, but they had a retail space in there. So you've seen that up in Harrisburg, PA, like the microbreweries. They have a brewery on site, or they have a restaurant, like a brew pub. That could be permitted in those uses, but large scale industrial in terms of large scale manufacturing, et cetera, no, it would not be envisioned to be, because again, there's been studies done by your EPA area-wide studies by the city that have actually looked at market analysis and said, the market analysis is not saying we can put industrial uses there. So your owner of that one property was actually at the open house and was very receptive to the new zoning for his property. So again, that's again what we evaluated the comprehensive plan, et cetera, to get to that decision that those large scale industrial uses. I know I live in Carlisle, former Maslin carpet factory, tire wheel, large scale industrial properties that took up literally over 60 acres of the downtown borough, was redeveloped as former brownfields. No industrial uses are in there because all the industrial uses have large truck. They need quick access to transportation, need access to rail, and none of that's really available in downtown Carlisle anymore. But that helps answer your question.
Yeah.
On that. So again, you're starting to see the change that, Procter & Gamble would have never located, nor would you probably wanted Procter & Gamble to locate. It's probably pretty much take up your whole city area. So if you think about here in this area in terms of logistics, distribution, warehouse, manufacturing, where they're going to your business parks out in the county. So again, there's certain scale we call craftsman industrial, but they're specifically defined in the ordinance, but no specific large scale industrial properties or zones are anticipated or in this ordinance.
Okay, then I'm going to move on to our discussion action item, which is the next item on the agenda, and that's the approval or denial of the December 2, 2020 public hearing before the Planning Commission. I take it that this is whether we're going to have a public hearing at the December meeting in regards to the zoning.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might jump in here, the town of Ranson went through this process a couple of years ago, and that matter got appealed to Judge Hammer. Thanks to Andy's institutional knowledge of Ranson, he directed me to that order, and Judge Hammer reviewed the process in which the town of Ranson adopted their zoning ordinance. And the town had a public hearing at the Planning Commission and the 2 public hearings at the council meeting. It is my recommendation that we adopt that procedure that Judge Hammer has blessed to help ensure that our ordinance is properly adopted. And it's my recommendation to the Planning Commission that we approve for our December Planning Commission meeting a public hearing on the ordinance. I believe that we've been in conversation with Dana and Kim that there is enough time to notice that public hearing. There is some publication requirements, and I believe that would be the most appropriate method that the Planning Commission can do to advance this zoning ordinance.
So noted. Thank you very much.
That we schedule the next planning meeting to include a public hearing on the proposed zoning ordinance.
Okay, the motion has been made. Thank you very much. And do I have a second?
I'll second that. Yes. Jeff
We have a
Melinda.
second. Thank you, Commissioner Melinda. And any further discussion?
Yes, I have a quick question. On page 7, on the study and report on the zoning, I briefly heard you mention something about brownfield properties. So I guess I'm trying to understand what is the plan for with the possibility of upgrading these particular areas to make them useful, especially when we look at the Interwoven Mills site, we look at the Thorn Lumber site, look at the Matthews Foundry site. So what is the plan from to actually update and possibly build that those particular areas up, to be able to, I guess, present them to the community for, some type of use. So what's the plan for that?
So the city had done, Kim and Dana, was it 2 or 3 years ago, went through, had grant money from the Environmental Protection Agency, conducted extensive public input, which was required by the EPA. I was not involved, so I'm going off of information that I know. But they had done specific area-wide plans for each of those sites. Those sites, that area-wide plan specifies a future vision of the redevelopment of those properties to include potential adaptive reuse of those buildings. Obviously, that's all market-driven. There was extensive market studies to actually help inform what the possibilities would be. Of course, that's several years ago. Now we're going through COVID, so who knows? We probably have to take a fresh look or somebody. But I go back to the economic development overlay. That's exactly the purpose of that overlay district. That's the exact purpose of the urban renewal authority that's being contemplated by city council. And that also gives tools in the toolbox to help revitalize, redevelop those properties. So like any other property, they'd have to come before the Planning Commission or City Council to present a proposed land development plan for the reuse of those properties. They would need to go through all the permitting processes, et cetera. So the vision or the visions for the reuse of those properties are laid out in those brownfield area-wide studies. What we've done is to recognize those studies and recognize the potential mixed-use opportunities from a mixed-use commercial that those studies have actually championed. So hopefully that answers your question. The zoning ordinance provides kind of the, hopefully the facilitation of the redevelopment, but the specific details are to be determined going forward once a viable developer owner comes forward with a reuse idea that meets the zoning criteria, but also to that economic development overlay. Also, the intent is to give some flexibility in those district plans. So that would also give the tools to actually have more master planning done for those site specifics that the city could participate in versus being reactive to an entity coming forward. And you might say reactive, you're seeing it for the first time. So now you want something that's consistent with your brownfield planning. So that urban renewal, economic development overlay process that we have in the zoning ordinance really capstone. So that's a great question because it really kind of hits home why we put that economic development overlay district in the zoning ordinance, and it opens up and then allows that urban renewal authority and process under the code to come forward. So again, I know the council had talked about that at one of their last meetings last month. So Shane, your economic development director, Farthing, gave me an update on that. So that's encouraging. So the process is moving at some point here with evaluating.
Now, do we have access to those studies?
I'm sorry, but we're really talking about a motion for a public hearing here. I mean, that's the motion has been made for a public hearing, and then we asked for discussion about the public hearing. So,
and yes, Dana can help you with that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so any other questions or comments in regards to the public hearing that we've had a motion for? If not, then I'll take a motion, or all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, thank you very much.
Do we need
Anything
to plan
else?
on, do we need to plan on that one being a long one?
Yes.
Okay. So bring your snacks and drinks.
Okay, all right. Okay, anything else for the good of the order then?
I would move that we adjourn.
We've had a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Yvonne.
Yvonne. Okay, thank you very much. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
We are adjourned.
Reset your clock back there.